Hello, I'm Morris Ruddick. In this session of Jewish Business Secrets, we're going to take a closer look at how entrepreneurship plays a vital role in what I describe as God's economy. Entrepreneurship is about opportunity. It's about risk and the response in terms of strategy. We have suggested that at the core of Jewish Business Secrets is a different way of thinking. Part of this difference in mindsets is the entrepreneurial way of thinking. Entrepreneurial thinking is just as valid for startups as it is for multinational corporate enterprises. Now, in keeping with embracing new mindsets, I'd like to describe what can happen when making God your senior partner. It affects not only your destiny, but the way the spiritual supersedes the natural with the operation of our enterprises. Indeed, it incorporates a different way of viewing things. Jewish entrepreneurs have a different way of looking at community, which gets back to the model. We will explore this important dimension of community in more detail in another session. When God, in fact, becomes senior partner of an enterprise, and more so within a community that adheres to this premise, then the dynamic I describe as God's economy is released. Let me illustrate. After Abraham had led a very meaningful and full life, his son Isaac assumed his mantle and was pursuing the destiny that God had promised to Abraham's descendants. There then came a season of famine that made Isaac want to move and find more fertile land in which to live. However, God spoke to Isaac and told him to stay in the land that God had given to his father. In doing so, all the blessings of God had promised to Abraham would manifest for Isaac. So Scripture tells us that Isaac stayed, according to what he heard from God. Isaac then sowed his seed in a place of famine, as God instructed him, a place where nothing had been growing. In the same year of this planting, he reaped 100-fold. The story continues by stating that from this point, Isaac began to prosper and continued prospering until he became very prosperous. So it was that in a land where nothing had been growing, that Isaac heard from God and obeyed. The oppression created by the famine had no power to impede Isaac's efforts. The result not only blessed Isaac, but it captured the attention of the heads of other societies in the area. It is written that Abimelech went to Isaac with the commander of his army, wanting to establish a treaty with Isaac, because he had seen that God was with him. God's economy is released when the practice of making God your senior partner, of listening carefully to and heeding his voice with decisions and planning, becomes foundational to the way a business and a community is operated. God's nature is to create, innovate, build, and multiply. These dimensions are the very foundation of what we call entrepreneurship. When God is made senior partner with an undivided heart, then the application begins releasing God's economy and the potential for an exponential multiplication. Let me give you an example from some other people we know. In a poor, rural area of Vietnam, we conducted one of our entrepreneurial workshops. This workshop was attended by a pastor who had started several home churches in the region. This pastor was very poor. He didn't even have the funds needed to pay the tuition for his children to go to secondary school. After attending our workshop, he was praying and thinking about what I had said about commercializing a gift. Both his wife and his mother happened to be excellent cooks. This man also remembered that there was a breakfast noodle business in a good location in his community that was shutting down. He had a strong perception that God was telling him that he should buy the equipment from the owners and reopen the breakfast noodle business. He borrowed the money from people who trusted him, and that's what he did. People in the community were curious about this pastor. There had been a lot of rumors about what kind of a man he was because he had been arrested for his church activities. So word got around about he, his wife, and his mother starting this small breakfast noodle business. People first came because of their curiosity about this pastor. Then they found that his wife and mother had excellent recipes, and the breakfast noodles they served were especially delicious. They also found that they really liked this affable pastor and the way he was always helping others in the community. In only 1 month, this new business was making a profit and starting to grow. Small specialty eating places serving only one dish are very popular in Vietnam. While this pastor's wife and mother spent more time than he did with the business, this breakfast eating place was open just a few hours every morning. This pastor spent about 3 hours each morning while it was open, meeting and talking with members of the community, assisting his wife and mother where needed in serving the tables. Rather than distracting his pastoral responsibilities, it augmented them. More than the additional income, this simple business enabled this man to meet with people in the community he might never otherwise have met. Also, not only did the income it created enable them to pay the tuition for their children's education, but after the business grew, they also set up an education fund to help some of the other poor families in his community with scholarships. Entrepreneurship challenges the status quo. It releases the creative and establishes a new order of things. One of the best descriptions of an entrepreneur found any place in Scripture is found in the final chapter of Proverbs, a chapter describing the type of woman every man wants for his wife. In the midst of this description of an excellent woman are the qualities incorporated in an effective entrepreneur. This proverb notes that she considers a field and she buys it. The woman entrepreneur wisely identifies opportunity and decisively takes advantage of it. The passage goes on to state that out of her earnings, she plants a vineyard. The woman entrepreneur makes her assets work for her. This proverb continues by stating, she sets about her work vigorously. Diligence and hard work are cornerstones for successful entrepreneurship and God's economy. The woman in this proverb was a good steward. This proverb continues, she sees that her trading is profitable. Increase in profit are a vital part of operating any enterprises. Then finally, her lamp does not go out at night. Dependability requires sacrifice to get the job done with excellence. What is being described in this approach that merges the spiritual, community, and entrepreneurial is not only a different way of thinking, it also releases a creative advantage. We'll be talking more about this creative advantage that results from this new way of thinking in a future session. The creative that reflects the foundations of Jewish business secrets incorporates vision, an investigative approach, imagination, planning, strategy, and excellence. When combined with prayer, God as senior partner, and faith, it brings about results that most usually exceeds expectations. Let me conclude with a story of a company we were familiar with years ago that gives a gripping example of this different way of thinking and how expectations can be exceeded. In the mid-1970s, the Williams Companies was a small, respectable pipeline company. There then came a time when Joe and John Williams, the founders, recognized what they felt was unusual opportunity in their market. They decided to make a corporate acquisition as a part of their growth strategy. It was an unusual step because in making their bid, they were attempting to acquire a company that was 10 times their current revenues. In a remarkable feat, they were successful in their bid for Great Lakes Pipeline. The Wall Street Journal had a front-page article about this amazing acquisition that was titled, "The Minnow Swallows the Whale." In a highly competitive world, we sometimes need to have our vision expanded. I'm not suggesting recklessness or presumption. However, true entrepreneurship in God's economy employs faith in dealing with risk, but faith that has done its homework and is willing to work hard to achieve unusual goals. There's an old saying among faith-based people: pray as if it all depends on God, and work as if it all depends on you. This is Morris Ruddick. During our next session, I want to talk about the gift of community.